I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 35, and I stood frozen as my sister Rebecca pointed at me across her wedding reception. "Security! Remove her now!" she screamed, face flushed with rage. The guards approached uncertainly, glancing between us. Our family watched, some smirking, as my childhood trauma replayed in adulthood. Rebecca's eyes widened when the head of security whispered in her ear. What my sister didn't know was that I owned not just this resort, but the entire $12 million luxury chain she'd chosen for her dream wedding. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you want more true stories about family drama and sweet, sweet karma. Now, let's rewind to where this all began. Growing up in our modest Chicago suburb, I learned early that in the Mitchell family, there were different rules for different daughters. Our split-level home on Maple Street was comfortable enough, but tensions always ran high beneath the surface pleasantries. Dad worked as an insurance adjuster while Mom taught elementary school, providing us a stable if unexciting middle-class life. Rebecca arrived when I was 3, and from the moment she took her first steps, my parents treated her like their golden child. My achievements were acknowledged with quiet nods, while hers were celebrated with parties and excessive praise. At first, I thought maybe I wasn't trying hard enough, so I pushed myself harder in everything I did. By high school, the pattern was undeniable. I maintained straight, as while participating in debate club and business leadership programs, Rebecca struggled academically but was beautiful and socially gifted. My parents attributed my success to being naturally smart and her challenges to teachers not understanding her learning style. They hired tutors for her while telling me I didn't need help. The first major betrayal came during my senior year. Since middle school, I'd been saving for college, working weekends and summers at local shops and restaurants. My grandmother had also left a small college fund for each of us. 3 weeks before tuition was due, my parents called a family meeting. "Cassandra," Dad began awkwardly, "we need to discuss something important." Mom jumped in, her voice falsely cheerful. "Rebecca's been accepted to a prestigious performing arts summer program. Isn't that wonderful?" I nodded, confused about why this required a family discussion. "The thing is," Dad continued, "it's quite expensive, and with college coming up for both of you." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You're taking my college money for Rebecca's summer program?" "Not all of it," Mom clarified, as if that made it better. "And it's not just your money. We're using both your funds, plus taking out a loan." "Both our funds?" "But Rebecca's only a freshman. She has 3 more years to save." "This opportunity is too important," Dad insisted. "You can take out student loans like other kids. You're smart enough for scholarships anyway." That night, I learned the grandmother's college fund I thought was in my name had been accessed by my parents years ago. They'd spent most of it on Rebecca's dance lessons, cheerleading camps, and pageant competitions. I ended up working 3 jobs while attending community college for 2 years before transferring to a state university's business program. I graduated with honors, crushing debt, and a growing determination to succeed despite my family. The next significant betrayal came during my junior year of college. I'd been dating James, a kind engineering student, for almost a year. We were discussing moving in together after graduation when he suddenly became distant. After a week of unanswered texts, he finally agreed to meet. "I can't do this anymore," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "Your sister told me everything." "My sister? What are you talking about?" "Rebecca showed me the messages, Cassandra. The ones you've been sending to your ex." "There was no ex. There were no messages." When I confronted Rebecca during her campus visit, she shrugged innocently. "He wasn't right for you anyway. Too boring. Besides, he was totally into me the minute we met." Her smile turned cold. "I did you a favor." I later discovered she'd created fake messages using a texting app. By the time I uncovered the truth, James had transferred to another university. That betrayal marked a turning point. I stopped sharing details of my life with my family. After graduation, I accepted a management trainee position with a hotel group in Miami, putting 1,000 miles between us. I called on holidays and visited once a year, maintaining minimal contact while focusing on building my career. My parents interpreted my independence as abandonment. "You always think you're better than us. my mother complained during one brief visit. Meanwhile, they continued supporting Rebecca through 3 different college majors and 5 career attempts, always ready with excuses for her lack of follow-through. I stopped expecting anything from them, which was both freeing and profoundly sad. For years, I maintained this emotional distance, creating a life they knew almost nothing about while they continued to treat me like the family disappointment despite all evidence to the contrary. Miami's vibrant hospitality industry proved to be exactly where I belonged. I started as a management trainee at the Palmview Hotel, a mid-tier property catering to business travelers. My work ethic and attention to detail quickly caught the attention of upper management, and within 18 months, I was promoted to front office manager. The hours were brutal: early mornings, late nights, and holidays spent soothing disgruntled guests rather than celebrating with friends. But I was learning the business from the ground up, understanding every operational aspect from housekeeping logistics to reservation systems. During my 3rd year in Miami, I met Harriet Sullivan at an industry conference. At 62, Harriet was a hospitality legend who had built and sold 2 successful boutique hotel brands. She was delivering the keynote address when our eyes met across the ballroom. Something in my expression must have caught her attention because she sought me out during the networking reception afterward. "You looked like you were actually listening," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Harriet Sullivan. Cassandra Mitchell. And I was listening. Your approach to experiential luxury is fascinating." We talked for nearly an hour. By the end of the evening, she'd offered me a position with her consulting firm, Sullivan Hospitality Group. The salary was less than I was making at Palmview, but the opportunity to learn from Harriet was priceless. For 2 years, I traveled with Harriet, helping struggling properties identify operational inefficiencies and implement strategic improvements. We worked with everything from mountain lodges to urban boutiques, but I was particularly drawn to coastal properties. There was something about the intersection of luxury and natural beauty that spoke to me. "You've got good instincts," Harriet told me after we successfully turned around a failing beachfront hotel in the Florida Keys. "But you're wasting them making other people money." The next week, she called me into her office and slid a property prospectus across her desk. "Sunset Harbor Resort," she said. 26 rooms, private beach access. Failing because the owners don't understand their market. They're asking $2 million, but they'll take $1.5. It's a steal. I laughed. For someone with $1.5 million? Maybe. I have investors who trust my judgment. I'm putting in $500,000. You find the rest, and we're partners. 60-40 split in my favor until you buy me out. It took 3 months of rejected loan applications before I found a bank willing to take a chance on me. I leveraged everything I owned, including selling my car and emptying my 401k. The stress was overwhelming, but on the 15th of April 2014, Sunset Harbor Resort became my first property. The first year was a nightmare. We discovered structural issues during renovation that ate through our contingency fund. A hurricane damaged the newly renovated beach cabanas. 3 key staff members quit simultaneously. I worked reception, cleaned rooms, and fixed plumbing issues myself when necessary. But slowly, things improved. We rebranded as Serenity at Sunset Harbor, the first property in what would become the Serenity Resorts chain. Our focus on personalized luxury experiences and impeccable attention to detail began attracting a loyal clientele. By the end of the 2nd year, we were operating at 85% occupancy, well above industry average. Harriet introduced me to her network of private investors, and in 2016, we acquired a struggling property in Key West. The following year, we added a 3rd location in Naples. Each property underwent extensive renovation to align with the Serenity brand, aesthetic understated luxury, location-specific design elements, and exceptional service. For security and tax purposes, I established Mitchell Holdings LLC as the parent company, keeping my name off public-facing documents. The press occasionally speculated about the mystery owner behind the rapidly growing Serenity brand, but I preferred operating behind the scenes. The fewer people who knew about my success, the better, especially my family. Not that they didn't find out eventually. My mother called one afternoon as I was reviewing plans for our 4th property. "Cassandra," she said, her voice falsely casual. Mrs. Peterson's daughter works for some travel magazine. She mentioned seeing your name in an article about hotels. The unspoken question hung in the air. I'm doing well, I said simply. Well enough to help your sister? She's starting a boutique, and the startup costs are significant. Your father and I have remortgaged the house twice already. That was the beginning of the loan requests. Small amounts at first $5,000 for Rebecca's boutique inventory, $8,000 when my father's car needed replacing. Then, larger sums $20,000 when they faced foreclosure after Rebecca's business failed, $35,000 for my mother's medical bills. I helped with the medical expenses but established firm boundaries around other requests. My parents interpreted this as selfishness rather than self-preservation. During one particularly heated phone call, my father accused me of hoarding my success. Family helps family, he insisted. Yes, I replied quietly. That's supposed to work both ways. By 2020, Serenity Resorts encompassed 7 luxury properties stretching from the Florida Keys to the Gulf Coast, valued at approximately $12 million. I had bought out Harriet's stake, though she remained a trusted advisor, expanded our management team, and established a reputation for excellence within the industry. I had also cultivated a tight circle of genuine friends who knew the real me, Jillian, a marketing executive I'd met at a charity gala, and Aiden, an architectural designer who had worked on several of our properties. They provided the emotional support my family never had, celebrating my successes without resentment and offering honest feedback when needed. I had created a life that exceeded my wildest expectations, built on my own terms. I was finally at peace with my family situation, or so I thought, until Rebecca's wedding invitation arrived. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a thick cream envelope with gold foil lettering addressed to Miss Cassandra Mitchell and guest. Inside, an elaborately designed card announced the upcoming nuptials of Rebecca Lynn Mitchell and Thomas James Cooper at Sapphire Cove Resort, my flagship property and the crown jewel of the Serenity Resorts chain. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes, certain there must be some mistake. Rebecca and I had barely spoken in 2 years. Not since her last failed business venture, a luxury pet spa concept she'd abandoned after 3 months, leaving unpaid vendors and angry customers in her wake. She'd expected me to bail her out then, too. More shocking than the invitation itself was her choice of venue. Sapphire Cove was my most personal project, a property I had designed from the ground up after acquiring a neglected beachfront estate. Every detail reflected my vision, from the architectural elements to the custom fragrance that scented the common areas. Had she known it was mine? That seemed impossible. I'd been careful to keep my ownership private, with the resort officially owned by Mitchell Holdings, LLC. The company name could be coincidental from her perspective. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Did you get it? My mother's voice was expectant. Isn't it beautiful? Rebecca designed it herself. Mom, why is Rebecca getting married at Sapphire Cove? Oh, she fell in love with it online. Thomas's family is covering the wedding costs. His father owns that construction company, you know. Rebecca says it's the most exclusive resort in the Keys right now. The irony was almost too much. Does she know it's mine? A pause. What do you mean, yours? I sighed. Nothing. Look, I'm not sure I can make it. Things are busy here. Cassandra Mitchell, this is your sister's wedding. You haven't seen the family in over a year. People are starting to talk. What people, Mom? Who exactly is discussing my absence at family gatherings? Everyone. The neighbors. The family. She lowered her voice. Honey, we know you've been struggling. Rebecca feels terrible about how your paths have diverged. She specifically wanted you there even though she's had to limit the guest list because of the venue costs. Struggling? I repeated. What exactly has Rebecca been saying about me? Nothing bad. Just that your hotel job keeps you busy. She worries about you working so hard for other people while she's building something of her own with Thomas. The sheer audacity of that lie momentarily rendered me speechless. According to my mother, Rebecca had crafted an entirely fictional narrative where I was still a hotel employee working for other people, while she was the successful one marrying into money. After ending the call with a non-committal promise to check my schedule, I immediately contacted Jillian and Aiden. We met for dinner at my penthouse apartment that evening. So your sister is having her wedding at your resort without knowing it's yours? Jillian clarified, topping off our wine glasses. That's some cosmic justice right there. The universe does have a sense of humor, Aiden agreed. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I picked at my salad. I don't know. Part of me wants to skip it entirely. But the other part, Jillian prompted, wants to see her face when she eventually finds out. Which she will, Aiden pointed out. The staff knows you. Someone's bound to say something. That was the complication. I made regular visits to all my properties, and Sapphire Cove was my most frequent destination. The staff knew me well. Asking them to pretend otherwise felt dishonest. You could tell her beforehand, Jillian suggested. Rip the Band-Aid off. I shook my head. She'd just changed venues and tell everyone I was trying to ruin her wedding. You don't know, Rebecca. Then go and don't say anything unless directly asked, Aiden said. It's not your fault she chose your resort. You're under no obligation to volunteer information she hasn't bothered to research. The decision weighed on me for days. Finally, I called Michael Reynolds, Sapphire Cove's general manager. Miss Mitchell, what a surprise, he said. I was just about to email you about a wedding booking. A Rebecca Mitchell, any relation? My sister, I confirmed. And that's actually why I'm calling. She doesn't know I own Serenity Resorts. And for family reasons, I'd prefer to keep it that way during her wedding. Michael was understandably confused, but agreed to brief the staff. We would say I was a special consultant if anyone questioned my familiarity with the property or staff. I also arranged several upgrades to Rebecca's wedding package, a complimentary bridal suite upgrade, a sunset champagne cruise for the wedding party, and a few other touches I knew she'd appreciate. Whatever our differences, she was still my sister. 2 days before the wedding, I received a call from my mother. Cassandra, we've had a slight change of plans. The resort only had 2 beachfront cottages available, and Rebecca needs them for Thomas's parents and the maid of honor. Would you mind staying at the Holiday Inn in Marathon? It's only 20 minutes away. I bit back a laugh. I've already arranged accommodation, Mom. Don't worry about me. Oh, well, that's good. Rebecca was concerned. After ending the call, I discovered the truth through a quick check of our reservation system. Rebecca had originally booked me into the Orchid Suite, one of our premium rooms. She had personally called to downgrade my reservation to a standard garden view room, citing budget constraints despite the fact that I could see Thomas's side had reserved 10 premium suites for their guests. That evening, I received a group text from Rebecca to all wedding guests. Sandwiched between reminders about the dress code and photo policy was a pointed paragraph. Some family members have privately expressed concern about the expense of this celebration. Please know that while we're blessed to host our special day at such an exclusive venue, this doesn't reflect everyone's financial reality. We hope no one feels intimidated by the setting, and remember that gifts are truly not expected from those facing difficult circumstances. Attached was a link to her registry, featuring items ranging from $500 to $5,000. I forwarded the message to Jillian, who immediately called. Please tell me you're still going, she said. And please tell me I can be your +1. Because this is going to be the most entertaining wedding in history. The rehearsal dinner was held in Sapphire Cove's Ocean Terrace restaurant, a glass-enclosed space perched above the water with breathtaking sunset views. As I approached the entrance, Derek Lawson, head of security, greeted me with a discreet nod. Evening, Miss Mitchell, Miss Cassandra, he corrected himself, remembering our arrangement. Your family's already inside. The maitre d' escorted me to the private dining area, where about 30 people were mingling. My parents stood near the bar, my father already red-faced from whiskey. They looked older than I remembered. My mother's hair now completely gray. My father's posture slightly stooped. Cassandra! My mother air-kissed both my cheeks. You look professional. She eyed my simple black cocktail dress with faint disapproval. Where's Rebecca? I asked. Making an entrance, as usual, my father said, a hint of pride in his voice. Thomas's parents are over there, you should introduce yourself. I made my way toward an elegant couple in their 60s. The man had Thomas's tall build and confident stance. while the woman shared his warm smile. "You must be Cassandra," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Elaine Cooper, Thomas's mother. This is my husband, Robert. Pleasure to meet you both." "Thomas has told us about you," Robert said. "Quite the businesswoman, from what we hear. Hospitality industry, correct?" Before I could respond, Rebecca's voice rang out. "Everyone, we're here." All heads turned toward the entrance, where Rebecca stood with Thomas. She looked stunning in a fitted white dress, her blonde hair styled in loose waves. Thomas was handsome in a navy suit, his expression a mixture of adoration and slight bewilderment as he surveyed the room. Rebecca made a beeline for Thomas's parents, pulling me into a stiff hug along the way. "Cassie, you made it." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I was just telling Thomas's mom that you'd be coming straight from work. Hotel schedules can be so demanding. I managed to get away," I said neutrally. "Elaine, Robert, this is my older sister. She works for one of those big hotel chains in Miami Marriott, right?" "Actually, I began." "Cassandra was just telling us about her business," Robert interjected. Rebecca's smile faltered momentarily. "Business? Oh, you mean her job." Cassie's always been career-focused, unlike some of us who found work-life balance. She laughed, linking her arm through Thomas's. Thomas extended his hand. "Great to finally meet you, Cassandra. I've heard so much." "Likewise," I replied, noticing his firm handshake and direct gaze. There was an intelligence in his eyes that made me wonder what exactly Rebecca had told him about me. Throughout dinner, Rebecca dominated the conversation, repeatedly steering it toward the expense and exclusivity of the venue. "We were so lucky to get a reservation here," she gushed. "They're usually booked 2 years in advance, but they had a cancellation. The wedding coordinator says celebrities stay here all the time." When dessert arrived, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I washed my hands, I overheard voices from inside a stall. "Can you believe that dress? So corporate," a woman said, her words slightly slurred. Another voice laughed. Rebecca said her sister's super jealous of her lifestyle. Apparently, she's some kind of workaholic hotel manager while Rebecca's been dating doctors and entrepreneurs. God, imagine being the plain sister. At least she had the decency to dress boring so she doesn't outshine the bride. I dried my hands slowly, waiting until they emerged 2 of Rebecca's bridesmaids, both flushed from champagne. They froze upon seeing me. "Ladies," I nodded, maintaining my composure as I left. When I returned to the table, Rebecca was showcasing her engagement ring to my mother's friends. Thomas had it custom designed. The jeweler usually only works with A-list clients, but Thomas's family has connections. "It's lovely," one woman said, then turned to me. "Cassandra, your parents tell us you're still in Miami. Any special someone in your life?" "I'm focused on my career at the moment," I replied. "That's code for married to her job," Rebecca stage whispered. "Some of us prioritize differently." After dinner, guests gathered on the terrace for cocktails. I found myself next to Thomas. Both of us momentarily separated from the main group. "Your sister's quite something," he said, sipping his scotch. "That's one way to put it." He studied me curiously. "You know, it's funny. When I mentioned meeting you to my business partner, he asked if you were the Cassandra Mitchell behind Serenity Resorts. I told him that couldn't be right," Rebecca said. "You worked for a hotel chain." My heart skipped. "And what did your partner say?" "That Serenity's founder is notoriously private but supposedly brilliant. Young female entrepreneur who transformed the luxury boutique space in Florida." He raised an eyebrow. Strange coincidence with the name. Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared, slipping her arm possessively through Thomas's. "There you are. My bridesmaids want photos." Her eyes darted between us suspiciously. "We were just getting acquainted," Thomas explained. "Well, you'll have plenty of time for that later," Rebecca said, pulling him away. "Cassie, Mom's looking for you." I watched them leave, unsettled by the exchange. Thomas clearly suspected something, and Rebecca's possessiveness suggested she did too. Later, as the evening wound down, Rebecca cornered me in a quiet alcove. "What were you and Thomas discussing?" she demanded. "Just getting to know each other. He seems nice." "He's more than nice. He's successful, connected, and from an excellent family." She leaned closer. Listen, I know why you're here. Because you invited me? Don't play dumb. You're here to show off, to try and make me look bad in front of Thomas's family with your corporate success stories. I stared at her in disbelief. Rebecca, that's ridiculous. I saw you talking to his father about business. Just tone it down tomorrow, okay? This is my day. If anyone asks about your job, just keep it simple. No one needs to hear about your management position or whatever promotion you're angling for. You have nothing to worry about, I said truthfully. As she walked away, Michael Reynolds approached, tablet in hand. Cassandra. Sorry to disturb you. There's a small issue with the floral delivery for tomorrow. The roses your sister requested aren't available due to a supplier issue. I wanted to show you the alternatives before deciding. Rebecca whirled around. You know the manager? And he's consulting you about my wedding flowers? What's going on? We've met before, I improvised. I stayed here on business last year. And he remembers you? Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. Michael recovered quickly. We pride ourselves on remembering our guests, Miss Mitchell, especially those who express interest in our operations. Your sister asked very insightful questions during her stay. Rebecca seemed mollified but still suspicious. Well, I should be the one approving flower changes. It's my wedding. Of course. Michael nodded, leading her away while shooting me an apologetic glance. I retreated to the bar, ordering a much-needed vodka tonic. Thomas's father joined me moments later. Quite a venue your sister's chosen, he commented. I was surprised when Thomas told me the location. These Serenity properties are notoriously exclusive. It's beautiful, I agreed cautiously. You know, I've been in construction for 40 years. Built half the luxury developments in Palm Beach. He sipped his drink. I always appreciate people who understand quality and vision. The person behind this place certainly does. His knowing look told me everything. Robert Cooper had figured it out, even if he wasn't saying it directly. I should find my wife, he said finally. Early day tomorrow. But I look forward to getting to know you better, Cassandra. I suspect you're not exactly who your sister has described. As the dinner concluded, I seriously considered leaving. The charade was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, and Rebecca's hostility was palpable. But leaving meant letting her control the narrative once again, something I'd allowed for far too long. In my suite that night, the presidential suite I'd privately arranged rather than the downgraded room Rebecca had assigned me, I received a text from Thomas. Enjoyed meeting you tonight. Looking forward to welcoming you to the family properly. There's clearly more to your story than I've been told. I stared at the message for a long time, uncertain how to respond. Finally, I settled on. Likewise. See you tomorrow. Whatever happened at the wedding, it was becoming clear that the truth wouldn't stay hidden much longer. I woke at dawn to the sound of waves crashing against the shore below my suite. For a moment, I simply enjoyed the tranquility, knowing it would likely be the calmest part of the day. My phone already showed 5 missed calls from my mother and a series of increasingly frantic texts from Rebecca about various emergencies with wedding preparations. After a quick breakfast on my private terrace, I made my way to the bridal suite where Rebecca and her bridesmaids were getting ready. The hallway outside was cluttered with garment bags, makeup cases, and champagne bottles. Inside, chaos reigned. There you are. My mother grabbed my arm, pulling me into the room. Rebecca's been asking for you. The makeup artist is an hour late. The flowers are wrong. And she says her dress looks different than at the final fitting. Rebecca sat at the vanity in a silk robe, her face tear-streaked despite the half-finished makeup. Her bridesmaids hovered anxiously, several already dressed in the pale blue gowns Rebecca had chosen. Everything's falling apart, she moaned when she saw me. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and nothing is going right. What can I do to help? I asked, maintaining my calm. The next 2 hours were spent putting out metaphorical fires. I coordinated with the hotel staff to locate the missing makeup artist, stuck in traffic, helped a bridesmaid stitch a loose seam, and diplomatically handled Rebecca's claims that the delivered flowers were completely wrong, despite being exactly what she'd approved after last night's substitution. Throughout it all, I was acutely aware of how easily I could have resolved these issues with a single word to the staff. As the owner, I could have demanded immediate solutions, special accommodations, even compensations. Instead, I worked behind the scenes, slipping away to make quiet phone calls to Michael Reynolds, who expedited solutions without revealing my authority. The string quartet says they only know classical music, but I specifically requested they learn Taylor Swift songs. Rebecca wailed as the ceremony time approached. "I'll handle it," I assured her, stepping into the hallway to call Michael again. Within 15 minutes, a playlist of orchestral Taylor Swift covers had been arranged for the ceremony processional. By noon, Rebecca was finally in her wedding gown, a custom designer creation with a 10-foot train and crystal embellishments that caught the light with each movement. She did look genuinely beautiful, and for a brief moment, I saw the little sister I'd once adored before family dynamics had poisoned our relationship. "You look stunning, Rebecca," I said sincerely. She studied her reflection, momentarily satisfied. "I do, don't I?" Then her gaze shifted to me in the mirror. "You're still wearing that?" I glanced down at my deep blue cocktail dress, elegant, appropriate, and deliberately understated to avoid any accusation of outshining the bride. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing, if you're going to a business meeting," she sniffed. "At least pin these flowers in your hair or something." She thrust a small arrangement of white roses at me. "You look so corporate." Before I could respond, one of the bridesmaids burst in. "The wedding planner says there's a problem with the beach setup. Something about the tide coming in higher than expected." Rebecca's face crumpled. "No! The ceremony has to be exactly at the water's edge. That's what we paid for." "I'll go check," I offered, grateful for the escape. Outside, I found the wedding planner arguing with the resort's event coordinator. The morning's unusually high tide had indeed encroached on the planned ceremony space, leaving insufficient room for the elaborate floral arches and guest seating. "We can't just move everything back," the planner insisted. "The backdrop won't be the same for photos." I approached them quietly. "What if we relocated to the West Garden? The sunset backdrop would be even more spectacular than the original beach location." The event coordinator's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "That area is reserved for special occasions," I finished smoothly. "I'm sure an exception could be made." Within 30 minutes, the entire ceremony setup had been transferred to the resort's exclusive West Garden, an area normally reserved for private owner events and never made available to guests. The space featured a natural stone platform overlooking the ocean, framed by ancient banyan trees and fragrant jasmine. It was, objectively, a far superior location to the beach setup Rebecca had originally planned. When Rebecca was escorted to view the new arrangement, her initial outrage transformed into delight. "This is perfect. Thomas's mother will be so jealous. She wanted her niece's wedding here last year, and they told her it was a private area never used for events." Throughout these preparations, I kept noticing Thomas watching me with increasing curiosity. During a moment alone, as staff rearranged seating charts for the new location, he approached me. "Remarkable how quickly problems get solved when you're involved," he observed, "almost like you have some special influence here." I maintained my composure. "Just experienced with event planning. From your hotel job?" His tone was skeptical. "Rebecca mentioned you work in middle management at some chain hotel." Before I could respond, my father joined us, already showing signs of having started celebrating early. "Thomas, there's my new son-in-law." He clapped Thomas on the shoulder. "Getting some career advice from Cassie?" "Don't bother, she's always been all work and no results." "Not like our Rebecca." Thomas's eyebrows rose. "Is that so?" 35 and still punching a time clock, my father continued. "Meanwhile, Rebecca's marrying into one of Florida's biggest construction families. Always knew she'd be the successful one." The casual dismissal stung even after all these years. "Dad, I don't think Thomas wants to discuss. What exactly do you think Cassandra does?" Thomas interrupted, his tone deceptively casual. My father waved his hand dismissively. "Some hotel job. Assistant manager or something. Always was career-obsessed. Never balanced like Rebecca." Thomas glanced at me, clearly noting my lack of correction. "Interesting perspective." The conversation was interrupted by the wedding planner announcing it was time to take positions for the ceremony. As guests began to be seated, I found myself placed in the second row rather than with immediate family in the front. My mother shrugged apologetically when I pointed this out. Rebecca thought it would look more balanced this way, she explained. Thomas has 3 sisters, so I took my assigned seat without argument, though I noted that family friends I barely recognized were seated in the front row. From my position, I watched as Thomas's family was escorted to their places, his mother wearing an expression of barely concealed triumph, his father nodding politely to guests. The ceremony proceeded smoothly until the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union. During the momentary pause, one of Rebecca's bridesmaids, the same one I'd overheard in the restroom, leaned toward another and whispered just loudly enough for nearby rows to hear. I'm surprised her sister even showed up. Rebecca says she wasn't even going to invite her but felt obligated. Apparently, she's super jealous of Rebecca's life and success. Several guests turned to look at me, expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. I maintained a neutral smile, even as I felt my cheeks burning. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I overheard more snippets of conversation about me, all clearly originating from Rebecca's narrative. According to various guests, I was desperately single, struggling in my career, jealous of Rebecca's beauty and success, and had been invited out of pity. By the time we moved to the reception in the grand ballroom, I was fighting to maintain my composure. The final straw came during dinner, when I overheard my mother explaining to Thomas's aunt that Cassandra has always been the practical one, focused on her little hotel job. We worried she'd never find balance, but she seems content enough. Not everyone is meant for Rebecca's level of success. I excused myself, needing a moment alone. On the terrace outside the ballroom, I took several deep breaths of the evening air, trying to center myself. Rough day? I turned to find Thomas standing nearby, 2 champagne flutes in hand. He offered one to me. Just needed some air, I said, accepting the drink. I've been watching you today, he said after a moment. You've fixed at least a dozen problems without taking any credit. Interesting behavior for someone supposedly jealous and resentful. I sipped my champagne without responding. You know what else is interesting? When I mentioned Serenity Resorts to my business associate, he showed me an article about their founder. The photo was blurry and from a distance, but it looked remarkably like you. My pulse quickened. Is that so? The woman who built this resort chain is described as brilliant, innovative, and intensely private. She apparently uses holding companies to maintain her anonymity. He studied me carefully. Why would someone go to such lengths to hide their success? Unless, perhaps, there were people in her life who couldn't handle it. Before I could respond, Rebecca burst onto the terrace, her expression darkening when she saw us together. There you are. Thomas, your mother is looking everywhere for you. It's almost time for the toasts. She grabbed his arm possessively, shooting me a warning glance. Cassie, I think Mom needs help with something in the ladies' room. As Thomas reluctantly allowed himself to be led away, he glanced back at me with a look that clearly said our conversation wasn't over. I remained on the terrace a moment longer, steeling myself to return to the reception, where my family's fictional version of me had apparently become accepted fact among the guests. The irony that all of this was happening in my own resort, a testament to the success they refused to acknowledge, was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The reception was in full swing when I returned to the ballroom. The dance floor was crowded with guests moving to the live band's music, while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The space looked magical, crystal chandeliers dimmed to a warm glow, floral arrangements cascading from ceiling to floor, and the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the moonlight reflecting off the ocean. I made my way to the bar, ordering a sparkling water. As I waited, I noticed several of Thomas's business associates nearby, engaged in animated conversation. The expansion into the Keys was brilliant timing, one man was saying. Property values have nearly doubled since the initial acquisitions. What impressed me was maintaining the unique character of each location while creating brand consistency, another replied. The Serenity portfolio is a masterclass in luxury hospitality. I couldn't help smiling to myself. After years of hard work, hearing industry peers appreciating my vision was deeply satisfying. Are you familiar with Serenity Resorts? The question came from a distinguished older gentleman who had noticed my interest in their conversation. Somewhat, I acknowledged. George Harrington. He extended his hand. I've been trying to schedule a meeting with the founder for months. My investment group is interested in partnering on their new development in the Bahamas. I believe they're very selective about investment partners. I replied carefully. So I've heard. Apparently, the owner is here tonight. Thomas mentioned it earlier. My stomach dropped. Had Thomas figured it out completely? Excuse me, I said, retreating from the conversation. I scanned the room for Thomas and found him deep in conversation with his father and several other men I recognized as prominent figures in Florida's business community. Their eyes kept darting in my direction, reinforcing my suspicion that Thomas had indeed connected the dots. Across the room, I spotted Rebecca, now visibly intoxicated, holding court with her bridesmaids. Her laugh carried above the music as she gestured broadly, nearly spilling her champagne. When her gaze landed on me, her expression shifted from merriment to suspicion. I decided to find my mother, hoping to make an early exit before the situation deteriorated further. As I navigated through the crowd, I was intercepted by Elaine Cooper, Thomas's mother. "Cassandra, we haven't had a proper chance to talk," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Rebecca has told us so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied diplomatically. "She mentioned you work at a hotel? In management?" The slight emphasis on a hotel made her dismissive view clear. "Something like that." "How?" "Stable. Thomas's sisters are all married to professionals, a surgeon, an attorney, and a state senator." She sipped her champagne. "We had hoped Rebecca might have connections to elevate Thomas's social circle rather than, well, no offense intended." The condescension was so blatant, I almost laughed. None taken. "Though you might be surprised by the connections some hotel employees develop." She patted my arm patronizingly. "Of course, dear. Every job has its merits." As she walked away, I caught Thomas watching our interaction, a frown creasing his forehead. When our eyes met, he started toward me, only to be intercepted by Rebecca, who had clearly been monitoring his movements. The DJ announced it was time for the cake cutting, drawing guests toward the elaborate 6-tier creation displayed at the front of the room. I hung back, increasingly certain that making a graceful exit soon would be my best option. As the crowd thinned around me, George Harrington reappeared at my side. "I just had the most interesting conversation with Robert Cooper," he said. "He seems to think we've been misled about who owns Serenity Resorts." Before I could respond, Rebecca's voice cut through the room, amplified by the microphone she'd grabbed from the DJ. "Everyone, I'd like to make a special announcement." She swayed slightly, her words slurring. "My sister Cassandra is here tonight, all the way from her little hotel job in Miami." The crowd turned toward me, expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. "Cassie's always been so jealous of my life," Rebecca continued, her voice taking on a cruel edge. "Always competing with me, never quite measuring up. But tonight, I want everyone to know that I forgive her for trying to show off and network with my husband's business associates." A horrified murmur ran through the crowd. Thomas stepped forward, attempting to take the microphone, but Rebecca pushed him away. "No, everyone needs to hear this. My sister has been pretending to be someone important all night, talking business with Thomas's father, acting like she belongs in these circles." She pointed at me, her expression twisted with resentment. "She works at a Holiday Inn, everyone. Assistant manager. Not even general manager." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Thomas's associates looked confused, glancing between Rebecca and me with uncertainty. "Rebecca, that's enough," Thomas said firmly, finally wresting the microphone from her grasp. "No, she's ruining my wedding, just like she tries to ruin everything," Rebecca cried, her voice still carrying across the silent room. "Security. I want her removed from the property. Now." 2 security guards who had been stationed discreetly by the doors stepped forward hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, please calm down," one began. "Don't tell me to calm down. This is my wedding at my venue and I want her gone." Rebecca was nearly hysterical now, mascara streaking down her face. The head of security, Derek Lawson, approached cautiously. Miss Cooper. I'm afraid we can't. Can't what? Remove her? Do your job. Rebecca demanded. Derek looked directly at me, his professional demeanor wavering momentarily. Miss Mitchell, I apologize for the disruption. How would you like us to proceed? The room went completely still as the implications of his words registered. Rebecca froze, her mouth open in mid-tirade. Miss Mitchell? She repeated, her voice suddenly small. Why is he calling you that? Thomas stepped forward, realization dawning on his face. Because that's her name, Cassandra Mitchell. He turned to me, a mix of admiration and astonishment in his expression. Owner and founder of Serenity Resorts, including this property we're standing in right now. Isn't that right, Cassandra? The silence that followed was deafening. I felt dozens of eyes on me, including those of my stunned parents. For years, I had downplayed my success, allowed my family's false narrative to stand unchallenged. In that moment, I decided I was done hiding. That's correct, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent room. Sapphire Cove is part of the Serenity Resorts chain, which I founded and own. The room erupted in murmurs and gasps. Rebecca stared at me, her face draining of color. That's not possible, she whispered, though her expression showed she was beginning to realize the truth. You work at a hotel. You've always just worked at hotels. I've always worked in hospitality, I corrected gently, but not as an employee for many years now. My mother stepped forward, confusion written across her face. Cassandra, what is this? What are they talking about? Mom. Dad, I tried to tell you many times about my business, but you were never interested. Serenity Resorts is my company. I own all 7 properties in the chain, including the one Rebecca chose for her wedding. My father's face reddened. That's ridiculous. You couldn't possibly. Mr. Mitchell, Michael Reynolds interrupted, stepping forward. I'm the general manager of Sapphire Cove. Miss Mitchell is indeed our founder and owner. She's built one of the most successful independent luxury resort chains in Florida over the past 8 years. Rebecca's expression shifted from shock to fury. You knew? You knew this whole time and didn't say anything? You let me have my wedding here as some kind of sick joke? No, Rebecca, I said firmly. I respected your choice of venue. I arranged upgrades to your package at no extra cost. I solved problems all day to make sure your wedding went smoothly. I did everything possible to make today special for you, despite how you've treated me. This is sabotage, she cried, tears streaming down her face. You set me up to humiliate me. Thomas placed a steadying hand on her arm. Rebecca, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. The guests were now watching the scene unfold with undisguised fascination. Some of Thomas's business associates were whispering among themselves, looking at me with new interest and respect. I think, Thomas said quietly to Rebecca, that you owe your sister an apology. Rebecca shook off his hand. Apologize? To her? After she ruined my wedding with her? Her secret identity? The only person who has attempted to ruin anything tonight is you, Thomas replied, his voice hardening. Cassandra has been nothing but gracious. My mother stepped between us, her expression bewildered. I don't understand. If you own all this, why didn't you say something? Why let us believe you were struggling? I looked at her sadly. I tried to tell you, Mom. Every time I shared a success, it was dismissed or forgotten. Eventually, I stopped trying. My father shook his head in denial. This is nonsense. If you owned a business this size, we would have known. Would you? I asked quietly. When have you ever asked about my life? When have you ever celebrated my achievements the way you celebrated Rebecca's? The painful truth hung in the air between us. Around the room, guests were beginning to drift away, giving our family drama a wide berth. Thomas's father approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. I've been trying to meet with you for months, he said, a newfound respect in his voice. Your development in Key West is extraordinary. I had no idea you were Thomas's sister-in-law. Rebecca's eyes widened at this exchange, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. Her new father-in-law, whose approval she had desperately sought, was treating me with the deference reserved for valued business peers. Security, Rebecca said again, her voice now trembling. Please escort my sister out. Now, Derek Lawson looked to me for direction. Miss Mitchell? I surveyed the scene, my sister's tear-streaked face, my confused parents, the uncomfortable guests. This public confrontation was helping no one. It's all right, Derek, I said calmly. I'll be leaving shortly. Please ensure the reception continues without further disruption. As he nodded and stepped away, I turned to address the wedding guests still watching the scene. I apologize for this uncomfortable situation. Please continue enjoying the evening. The staff has been instructed to provide complimentary champagne for everyone, with my congratulations to the bride and groom. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, maintaining my dignity despite feeling dozens of eyes following my departure. As I reached the doors, I heard footsteps behind me. Cassandra! Wait! Thomas had followed me, leaving Rebecca fuming beside his father. I had my suspicions, but I couldn't put it all together until tonight, he said quietly. The way the staff deferred to you, how problems magically resolved when you stepped in. But why the secrecy? Why let Rebecca believe you were struggling? I sighed. It's complicated, Thomas. Family usually is. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. For what it's worth, I admire what you've built here, and I'm sorry for how tonight unfolded. Take care of Rebecca, I said. Despite everything, she's still my sister. As I walked away, I could feel the weight of years of pretense finally lifting from my shoulders. The truth was out now, for better or worse. What happened next would depend on whether my family could accept the reality of who I truly was, rather than who they had always assumed me to be. The morning after Rebecca's wedding, I sat on my suite's terrace watching the sunrise over the ocean. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I'd left the reception texts from my parents, demanding explanations, messages from Thomas's business associates requesting meetings, and a single text from Thomas himself. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. Rebecca had remained conspicuously silent, though social media showed the reception had continued well into the night despite the drama. Professional photos tagged by the photographer showed her smiling for the camera, giving no indication of the scene that had transpired. I had just finished my coffee when there was a knock at my door. Michael Reynolds stood outside, looking apologetic. Miss Mitchell, I'm sorry to disturb you, but your family is in the main lobby asking for you. Your sister is quite insistent. I sighed. Thank you, Michael. Please have them escorted to the private conference room. I'll be down shortly. After dressing in a simple but elegant blue dress, one that subtly featured Serenity's signature color, I made my way to the resort's executive wing. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see my parents seated at the table, both looking tired and confused. Rebecca paced near the windows, still in her honeymoon suite bathrobe, while Thomas sat quietly in the corner, his expression unreadable. As I entered, Rebecca whirled around. You, she sputtered. How dare you show your face after last night? Good morning to you too, Rebecca, I replied calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table. I believe you all have questions. Questions? My father exploded. You've been lying to us for years. I've never lied, I corrected. I simply stopped correcting your assumptions when it became clear you weren't interested in the truth. My mother's face crumpled. But why would you hide something like this? Your own success? Your own business? It doesn't make sense, Cassandra. Doesn't it? I looked at her directly. Every achievement in my life has been diminished or ignored by this family. When I made honor roll, it was because school comes easily to Cassie. When I got into college, it was overshadowed by Rebecca's high school play. When I bought my first property, you were too busy with Rebecca's latest venture to even acknowledge it. That's not fair, my father protested weakly. Isn't it? When's the last time either of you asked about my career? My life? My happiness? The only time I hear from you is when Rebecca has a crisis, or you need money. Thomas leaned forward. If I may, I've spent the morning making some calls. What Cassandra has built is extraordinary. Serenity Resorts is valued at approximately $12 million. The brand is considered one of the top luxury boutique chains in the Southeast. Rebecca made a choking sound. That's impossible. It's not only possible, it's fact, Thomas continued. Your sister is highly respected in the industry. Several of my associates at the wedding last night have been trying to meet with her for months regarding potential partnerships. My parents looked stunned. My father's mouth opened and closed several times before he could speak. $12 million? Our Cassie? He finally managed. The phrase, our Cassie, grated on me. I'd stopped being theirs long ago, when they'd made it clear I was secondary to Rebecca in every way. Yes, Dad. Your daughter who had to pay her own way through college because you gave her college fund to Rebecca. Your daughter who worked 3 jobs while studying business. Your daughter who you've dismissed as just having a hotel job for the past decade. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know. Because you never asked, I replied simply. Rebecca, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, suddenly slammed her hand on the table. This is all an act. She's making this up to steal attention from my wedding. She's always been jealous of me. Derek Lawson, who had been standing discreetly by the door, stepped forward. Miss Mitchell, sorry to interrupt, but we have that conference call with the investors about the Bahamas property in 15 minutes. Thank you, Derek. I nodded. Rebecca stared at the security chief. Then back at me. He? He works for you? The entire staff. They all work for you? Yes, Rebecca. Everyone you've been ordering around, complaining about, and threatening to have fired for the past 3 days is on my payroll. The realization seemed to finally penetrate. Rebecca sank into a chair, her face pale. The suite upgrades. The private garden. The special menu accommodations. That was all you? I wanted your wedding to be perfect, I said quietly. Despite everything, Thomas moved to stand behind his new wife, his hand on her shoulder. Rebecca, I think it's time you acknowledged some hard truths. She shook her head stubbornly. She deliberately humiliated me at my own wedding. No, Thomas said firmly. You did that yourself. Cassandra kept her ownership private to avoid exactly what ended up happening you, making the night about your issues with her rather than our marriage. My father cleared his throat. So all those times we asked for loans. I helped when it was for genuine needs. Like Mom's medical bills, I explained. I declined when it was to bail out Rebecca's failed businesses or cover your poor financial decisions. And the real estate investment opportunity I told you about last year? My father pressed. You said you couldn't afford it. Because it was a terrible investment, Dad. I reviewed the prospectus. The property had significant environmental liabilities and title issues. My mother dabbed at her eyes. All this time, we thought. You thought what you wanted to think. I finished for her. That Rebecca was the successful daughter, and I was the disappointing one who never lived up to her potential. It was easier than acknowledging you might have been wrong about both of us. Rebecca stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm not sitting here being lectured by my sister on my honeymoon day. Rebecca, Thomas said in a warning tone. We're not done here. Oh, we're very much done, she snapped, yanking her arm free. I want to check out immediately. We'll be staying elsewhere for our honeymoon. That's your choice, I said calmly. Your honeymoon accommodations at any Serenity property were to be my wedding gift to you. The Bali-inspired villa on the North Point has been prepared for a 2-week stay, but if you prefer to leave, I understand. Rebecca faltered, clearly torn between her anger and the appeal of what was undoubtedly the resort's most luxurious accommodation, a private villa typically reserved for celebrities and dignitaries, featuring its own infinity pool, private chef, and spectacular ocean views. The one with the private beach access? She asked, her resolve weakening. I nodded. The staff has been instructed to provide you with complete privacy and every amenity. But again, the choice to stay or leave is entirely yours. Thomas gave me a grateful look over Rebecca's head. Perhaps we should take some time to cool down before making decisions, he suggested to his wife. Why don't we go back to our suite and discuss this privately? As they left, Rebecca still looked stunned, while Thomas appeared thoughtful, nodding slightly to me as he closed the door behind them. Left alone with my parents, an awkward silence fell. They looked suddenly older, smaller somehow, as if the reality of the situation had physically diminished them. Why didn't you tell us? My mother finally asked, her voice small. I tried, Mom. For years I tried. But you and Dad were so invested in Rebecca being the successful one the special one. My achievements didn't fit your narrative. That's not true, my father protested. We've always been proud of you. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Last night you told Thomas I was all work and no results, and that Rebecca was the successful one. Those were your exact words, Dad. He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. It was easier to maintain your image of Rebecca as the golden child and me as the reliable disappointment. My mother reached across the table, attempting to take my hand. I gently but firmly withdrew it. Cassie, we've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we're your parents. We love you. I know you do. In your way, I acknowledged. But love, without respect or recognition, isn't enough anymore. I've built a life, and a business I'm proud of, without support from my family. That's a reality we all need to accept. My father, never good with emotional conversations, shifted uncomfortably. So what happens now? With the resort bill and everything? Of course, that would be his concern. Rebecca and Thomas's wedding has been fully paid for by his parents. Any additional charges during their stay will be covered as my gift to them, should they choose to remain. And us? He asked hesitantly. Your rooms are comped, of course. You're welcome to stay through the weekend as planned. There was so much more to say, years of hurt and misunderstanding to address. But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, and judging by their shell-shocked expressions, neither were they. I have a business to run, I said, standing. Please excuse me. As I reached the door, my mother called after me. Cassandra, are we going to be okay? I paused, considering the question. I don't know, Mom. That depends on whether you and Dad can accept who I actually am, rather than who you've always assumed me to be. Walking away from that conference room felt like crossing a threshold. For the first time in my adult life, my family truly saw me for who I was. Whether they could accept that reality remained to be seen, but I had finally stopped hiding my light to make others comfortable with their darkness. As I headed toward my office to join the investor call, I passed Michael Reynolds in the hallway. Everything okay, Miss Mitchell? He asked cautiously. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Yes, Michael. I think it finally is. The days following Rebecca's wedding passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal after the dramatic revelations. My parents had checked out quietly the morning after our confrontation, leaving a brief note saying they needed time to process everything. Rebecca and Thomas, surprisingly, had chosen to remain at the resort for their honeymoon, though they kept to their private villa, avoiding the main property areas where they might encounter me. 5 days after the wedding, I was reviewing architectural plans for our Bahamas expansion when my assistant announced Thomas was asking to see me. He entered my office looking tanned and rested despite the obvious tension in his shoulders. Thank you for seeing me, Cassandra. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. How's the honeymoon? The accommodations are extraordinary, he acknowledged. Rebecca is adjusting. I nodded, understanding the weight behind that simple statement. What can I do for you, Thomas? He leaned forward, clasping his hands. I feel I owe you an apology. I had suspicions about your real position for weeks before the wedding but chose not to confront Rebecca. That contributed to how poorly things unfolded. You've known your wife for 3 years, Thomas. I've known her for 35. Her reaction was entirely predictable. That's partly why I'm here, he said carefully. I'm beginning to realize there's a significant gap between who I thought I was marrying and the reality. I sighed. It's not my place to comment on your marriage. Perhaps not, but you have insights no one else does. He looked troubled. Rebecca's been telling me stories about your childhood, how you supposedly sabotaged her, stole her opportunities, turned your parents against her. But after seeing how events unfolded at the wedding, I'm questioning everything. I walked to the window overlooking the ocean, considering my response carefully. Family dynamics are rarely simple, Thomas. I won't claim to be blameless in our difficult relationship, but much of what Rebecca has likely told you is her own interpretation of events, shaped by years of being the family favorite. She says you've always been jealous of her natural talents, while you had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I couldn't help laughing at the irony. Is that what she believes? That I built a multi-million-dollar business out of jealousy? I'm starting to see the contradictions, he admitted. My family has been in business for generations. We recognize genuine accomplishment when we see it. What you've built here is remarkable, especially considering you did it without the advantages of family connections or inherited wealth. His words touched me more than I expected. After years of dismissal from my own family, having my achievements recognized felt both foreign and deeply validating. Rebecca believes you revealed your ownership at the wedding deliberately to humiliate her, he continued. I've tried explaining that you had every right to set the record straight after she publicly attacked you, but she's convinced it was all an elaborate setup. And what do you believe? I asked. I believe I've married into a family with complicated dynamics I'm only beginning to understand, he said diplomatically. I also believe my father-in-law contacted my father yesterday asking for investment in a new business venture, claiming insider knowledge of Serenity Resort's expansion plans. That revelation struck like a physical blow. He did what? Thomas looked grim. Apparently, learning his daughter owns a successful business has inspired him to try leveraging that connection, despite having no actual insider information. I returned to my desk, suddenly exhausted. I wish I could say I'm surprised. My father declined, of course. He suggested your father contact you directly if he had legitimate business proposals. The familiar pattern was emerging again, my success being treated as a family resource to exploit rather than an achievement to celebrate. It was disheartening but not surprising. Thank you for telling me, I said. I appreciate your honesty. Thomas nodded, then hesitated before adding, There's one more thing. Rebecca wants to meet with you. She insists it's important. I raised an eyebrow. Important to whom? She claims she wants reconciliation. But, he trailed off. But you're not convinced, I finished for him. He sighed heavily. I love my wife Cassandra, but these past few days have shown me aspects of her character I hadn't fully recognized before. The way she speaks about you, your parents, even the resort staff, there's a sense of entitlement I find troubling. That entitlement has been cultivated her entire life, I pointed out. It won't disappear overnight, if ever. I realize that now. He stood to leave. Will you meet with her? Tomorrow, perhaps? I'd be there as well. I considered refusing but recognized this might be a necessary step toward whatever our relationship would become going forward. Tell her to come to my office tomorrow at 10. After Thomas left, I called Jillian and Aiden, updating them on the latest developments. Both offered to be present for moral support during the meeting with Rebecca, but I declined. This was a family matter I needed to handle directly. The next morning, precisely at 10, Rebecca swept into my office wearing designer resort wear and oversized sunglasses, which she removed dramatically upon entering. Thomas followed, looking considerably more subdued. So this is where you've been hiding, Rebecca said, glancing around at the spacious corner office with its panoramic ocean views. Nice setup. Thank you for coming, I replied, deliberately ignoring her tone. Please, sit down. They settled into the chairs opposite my desk, Rebecca immediately crossing her arms defensively while Thomas maintained a neutral expression. Thomas says you wanted to speak with me. I prompted when Rebecca remained silent. She flicked an imaginary piece of lint from her sleeve. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I'm willing to forgive you for causing a scene at my wedding. I blinked, momentarily stunned by her version of events. That's generous of you. It is, she agreed, missing my sarcasm entirely. Family is important, and clearly there have been misunderstandings between us. Thomas shifted uncomfortably beside her. Rebecca, we discussed approaching this differently. She waved away his concern. I'm handling it, Thomas. Turning back to me, she continued, I've realized that your success could be beneficial for all of us. A fresh start for the family. What exactly are you proposing? I asked carefully. Well, for starters, I've been thinking about career options since my boutique didn't work out. Hospitality management seems interesting. I thought perhaps a director position at one of your properties? Something with authority but flexible hours. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of dismissing my career, she now expected to waltz into an executive position with no relevant experience or qualifications. Rebecca, I said gently, those positions require years of industry experience and specific qualifications. Her face hardened. I'm a quick learner. Besides, it's your company. You can hire whoever you want. That's not how I built a successful business, I explained. Every member of my team has earned their position through hard work and proven abilities. So that's a no? Her voice took on a familiar petulant tone. After everything I've been through? Thomas intervened. Rebecca, we discussed this. Cassandra runs a professional organization, not a family charity. She rounded on him. Whose side are you on? She humiliated me at our wedding, and now she's refusing to help family. I'm on the side of reason, he replied firmly. And if we're being honest, you humiliated yourself at our wedding. Cassandra has been nothing but professional despite significant provocation. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. I see how it is. You've both turned against me. No one has turned against you, I assured her. But I won't compromise my business principles, even for family. She stood abruptly. Fine. I thought we could work this out, but clearly you're still the same selfish person you've always been. Rebecca, that's enough, Thomas said sharply. This meeting was your idea, and you promised to approach it with maturity. I'm being perfectly mature, she snapped. I'm simply pointing out that some people never change. Cassandra has always put herself first, hoarding her success instead of sharing with family. The accusation was so fundamentally backward it momentarily left me speechless. Thomas looked embarrassed. Perhaps we should continue this another time, he suggested. One moment, I said, opening my desk drawer and removing a folder. Before you go, there's something I want to address. I placed several documents on the desk. These are records of financial transactions between our family members over the past 10 years. Rebecca eyed the papers suspiciously. What's that supposed to mean? It means I have documentation of every loan request, every financial emergency that required my assistance. It also means I have proof that Grandmother Sullivan's inheritance, which should have been divided equally between us, was entirely used for your benefit, with my portion being taken without my knowledge or consent. Rebecca's face paled slightly. That's ancient history. Mom and Dad made those decisions, not me. You were 19, Rebecca, not 9. You knew what was happening. I slid another document forward. I also have evidence of how you sabotaged my relationship with James in college using fabricated messages. He contacted me last year, wanting to clear the air. Thomas looked between us, clearly disturbed by these revelations. Rebecca, is this true? It was college drama, she dismissed, though her voice lacked conviction. Everyone does stupid things at that age. Most people don't deliberately destroy their sister's relationship out of spite, I pointed out, just as most people don't create false narratives about their sibling's career to make themselves look better by comparison. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. What was I supposed to do? You were always the smart one, the responsible one, the one who did everything perfectly. Do you know what it's like living in that shadow? Yes, actually I do. I've spent my entire life hearing how I should be more like you, more social, more balanced, more normal in my priorities. The difference is, I didn't try to tear you down to build myself up. She shook her head vehemently. That's not what I did. It's exactly what you did. When you couldn't match my academic achievements, you dismissed education as unimportant. When you couldn't match my career success, you characterized me as a corporate drone with no life. When you couldn't match my financial independence, you painted me as struggling and pathetic. Tears welled in her eyes. That's not fair. It's completely fair, Rebecca. For years, I've watched you twist the narrative to maintain your position as the family favorite. I stayed silent because confronting it seemed pointless. But I'm done hiding my success to protect your ego. Thomas placed his hand over Rebecca's clenched fist. I think we all need to acknowledge some difficult truths here. Rebecca, I've seen enough to know that Cassandra's perspective has validity. Your version of your relationship doesn't align with the evidence. Rebecca pulled away from him, tears now streaming down her face. So you're both ganging up on me now? On my honeymoon? This is exactly why I've always had to fight for myself. I sighed, recognizing the familiar pattern, Rebecca casting herself as the victim whenever confronted with uncomfortable truths. This isn't productive. Perhaps we should reconvene when emotions aren't so raw. Don't bother, Rebecca spat, standing again. I've heard enough. Enjoy your precious resort empire, Cassandra. Some things are more important than money and success. Like family? I asked quietly. Because that's what this is really about. Not money or success, but honesty and respect. Those have always been in short supply in our family, at least toward me. Rebecca had no response to that. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Thomas behind. He remained seated, looking troubled. I apologize for that. She's struggling with the paradigm shift of seeing you as successful rather than the person she's always believed you to be. It's not your place to apologize for her, Thomas. He nodded. I know, but I feel responsible for not seeing these dynamics earlier. I believe I've enabled some of her behaviors by accepting her version of events without question. We all play our parts in family systems, I acknowledged. Breaking those patterns isn't easy. No, he agreed, standing to leave. But it's necessary. For what it's worth, I admire how you've handled this situation. Many people would have exposed the truth much sooner, and much less gracefully. After he left, I stood at my office window, watching the waves crash against the shore far below. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. For too long, I'd allowed my family's distorted narrative to stand unchallenged. Whether this marked the beginning of healing or the final fracture in our relationships remained to be seen. But either way, I had finally spoken my truth. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, I sat in my office at Serenity's Miami headquarters reviewing quarterly reports. The floor-to-ceiling windows provided a stunning view of the city skyline, a visual reminder of how far I'd come from the struggling college student working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Serenity Resorts had continued to thrive. Our Bahamas property had opened to critical acclaim, and preliminary plans were underway for our first international expansion into the Turks and Caicos Islands. The business challenges provided a welcome distraction from the more complicated personal aftermath of the wedding revelations. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Mitchell, Thomas Cooper is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. I was surprised. I hadn't heard from Thomas in several months. Send him in, please. He entered looking different than I remembered, more relaxed in casual business attire, though his expression was serious. Cassandra, thank you for seeing me. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I gestured to the seating area by the windows. Please, sit down. Can I offer you something to drink? Just water, thanks. He settled into one of the chairs, waiting until my assistant had brought his water and left before speaking again. I wanted to update you personally rather than having you hear it elsewhere. Rebecca and I have separated. Though not entirely surprised, I was still taken aback by his directness. I'm sorry to hear that, Thomas. He shrugged slightly. It was a long time coming. The wedding drama was merely a symptom of deeper incompatibilities that became impossible to ignore. Still, divorce is never easy. Despite my complicated feelings toward Rebecca, I wouldn't wish that pain on her. We're not divorcing yet, he clarified. Rebecca agreed to couples therapy, though she's been resistant to individual counseling. My hope is that with professional help, she might gain some self-awareness. That would be unexpected but welcome, I said carefully. How is she otherwise? Struggling, he admitted. Your parents are pressuring her to reconcile with me, but for the wrong reasons. They're concerned about losing the financial security my family represents. I wasn't surprised by that information, though it was disappointing. And how are they? My parents, I mean. Your father vacillates between denial about your success and attempts to leverage it. He's approached my father twice more with investment opportunities, claiming to have your backing. I sighed. I've had my legal team send him a cease and desist letter. It seems he hasn't taken it seriously. Your mother seems more genuinely remorseful, Thomas continued. She's reached out to Rebecca several times about healing the family rift, though Rebecca has been unreceptive. My mother had sent me several tentative text messages in recent months, mostly surface-level check-ins that carefully avoided addressing our last conversation. I'd responded politely but maintained emotional distance, unwilling to re-engage without meaningful acknowledgement of the past. Has my mother tried contacting you directly? Thomas asked. In her way, I replied. Nothing substantial. He nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I think she genuinely regrets how things have played out, though she may lack the emotional vocabulary to express it effectively. That assessment aligned with my own observations. My mother had always struggled with direct emotional communication, preferring to paper over conflicts rather than address their root causes. Thank you for the update, I said, shifting the conversation. How are you doing with all of this? He considered the question thoughtfully. Disappointed but resolute. The past 6 months have been educational, to say the least. I've learned that love alone isn't enough when fundamental values are misaligned. Before I could respond, my assistant announced my next appointment had arrived. I should get going, Thomas said, standing. I'm in Miami for a few days on business. Perhaps we could have dinner? Purely as family or friends, if that's more comfortable. The invitation surprised me. I'd like that, I found myself saying. Despite everything, I'd come to respect Thomas and his straightforward approach to difficult situations. After he left, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected turns my life had taken since Rebecca's wedding. The public revelation of my success had rippled through my personal and professional worlds in unpredictable ways. Jillian and Aiden arrived that evening for our monthly dinner, a tradition that had become even more important during the tumultuous aftermath of the wedding. So, Thomas Cooper made a surprise appearance, Jillian remarked as we settled at our favorite rooftop restaurant. Spill the details. I recounted the conversation, including the news about Thomas and Rebecca's separation. Can't say I'm shocked, Aiden commented. The wedding itself was a preview of their fundamental incompatibility. True, I acknowledged. Though I take no pleasure in their struggles. Of course not, Jillian assured me. But it is another indicator that the family narrative is continuing to unravel. Speaking of which, any more communication from your parents? My father sent an email last week, the first direct contact since the wedding. He forwarded an article about family businesses and succession planning with the comment, "Something to consider." Aiden rolled his eyes. Still trying to find an angle, I see. At least he's consistent, I said wryly. My mother's approach has been more tentative. Birthday card, occasional texts about neutral topics like weather or neighborhood news. Nothing addressing the elephant in the room. And how are you feeling about all of it? Jillian asked, her expression concerned. 6 months is significant time for processing. I considered the question carefully. More at peace than I expected. The therapy has helped enormously. Following the wedding, I'd finally sought professional help to address the complex emotions surrounding my family dynamics. Weekly sessions with Dr. Marshall had provided valuable perspective on patterns I'd internalized without realizing their impact. I've spent so many years defining myself in opposition to my family's perception, I explained, building success partly to prove them wrong. Dr. Marshall has helped me recognize that while that motivation provided useful fuel, it's also limited me in some ways. How so? Aiden asked. By keeping me tethered to their narrative, even as I rejected it. True freedom comes from building a life based on my own values, not as a response to theirs. Jillian raised her wineglass. To defining success on your own terms. Speaking of success, Aiden said after we clinked glasses, "How's the Turks and Caicos project progressing?" As we discussed business developments, I felt profound gratitude for these friends who had supported me through everything. They had celebrated my victories, consoled me through difficulties, and provided the unconditional acceptance my biological family never had. 2 days later, as I was preparing to leave for dinner with Thomas, my assistant brought in a courier-delivered envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father, the first I'd received in years. "Cassandra, this letter is difficult to write. Your mother tells me I should have done it months ago, and she's right. Pride has never been in short supply in our family, but humility has been rarer. I was wrong about you, not just recently, but for many years. The narrative I helped create about you and your sister was unfair, and, as recent events have made painfully clear, entirely inaccurate. Watching Rebecca's wedding unfold as it did forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics. I've been favoring Rebecca at your expense since childhood, dismissing your achievements while celebrating hers regardless of merit. This pattern wasn't fair to either of you. It burdened Rebecca with expectations she couldn't fulfill and denied you the recognition you deserved. For that, I am truly sorry. I don't expect this apology to immediately repair decades of damage. I'm attending counseling, your mother's insistence, to better understand my role in our family's dysfunction. It's uncomfortable work, but necessary. If you're willing, I'd like to start rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. Not as a pathway to business opportunities, your lawyer's letter made that boundary very clear, but as a father who has missed knowing his daughter. With regret and hope, Dad. I read the letter twice, emotions churning. The apology was unexpected and imperfect, but it represented more self-awareness than I'd ever witnessed from my father. Whether it signaled genuine change or merely a temporary adjustment to new realities remained to be seen. That evening over dinner, I shared the letter with Thomas, who had become an unlikely confidant in navigating the complex aftermath of the wedding revelations. It's a start, he observed after reading it. More direct accountability than I would have expected. Based on what I've seen. My thoughts exactly, I agreed. The question is whether it represents genuine insight or simply recognition that the old approach isn't working anymore. Sometimes those are the same thing, Thomas pointed out. People rarely change without some external pressure forcing them to reevaluate. We spent the rest of dinner discussing lighter topics, his family's construction business, my expansion plans, mutual acquaintances in Miami's business community. There was an easy camaraderie between us that felt refreshingly uncomplicated compared to the rest of my family interactions. As we parted after dinner, Thomas handed me a small gift bag. I came across this while going through some of Rebecca's things. I thought you should have it. Inside was a faded photograph I hadn't seen in years. Rebecca and me as children, maybe 7 and 10 years old, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning widely on a beach that I recognized as part of what was now Sapphire Cove's property. Where did you find this? I asked, surprised by the surge of emotion the image evoked, mixed in with Rebecca's childhood memorabilia. She has a box of photos she keeps hidden away. This was underneath several layers. The implications were clear despite everything. Rebecca had preserved this evidence of our once close relationship, keeping it private but not discarding it. Like the foundation of Serenity Resorts itself, perhaps there remained something solid beneath years of accumulated debris, something that could potentially be rebuilt if approached with patience and care. The following weekend, I visited Dr. Marshall for our regular session, bringing both my father's letter and the childhood photograph. What do these items represent to you? She asked after examining them. Possibility, I replied after consideration. Not certainty, but possibility. Of reconciliation? Of something new, I clarified. The old relationships were built on false narratives and unbalanced expectations. Those can't be repaired, they need to be replaced entirely. And is that something you want? She probed gently. I looked at the photo again, remembering the simple joy of that day at the beach. I think it is. Not because they're family by blood, but because healing those relationships would represent a kind of freedom I haven't yet experienced. Freedom from what? From the last tethers of defining myself in opposition to their narrative, I explained, understanding it fully as I spoke. Complete freedom would mean their opinion, positive or negative, no longer factors into my sense of self-worth or accomplishment. Dr. Marshall nodded approvingly. That's profound insight, Cassandra. Many people never reach that level of emotional independence. In the months that followed, I began cautiously rebuilding connections with my family, not by returning to old patterns, but by establishing new boundaries and expectations. My father and I started with occasional phone calls, carefully neutral, but gradually becoming more substantive. My mother and I met for lunch monthly, working through decades of miscommunication with halting but sincere effort. Rebecca remained the most distant, still struggling to reconcile the sister she'd constructed in her mind with the reality of who I actually was. Our interactions were limited to brief encounters at family gatherings, civil but guarded. Thomas and I maintained our unexpected friendship, even after he and Rebecca finalized their divorce a year after the wedding. His insight into family dynamics from an outsider's perspective proved invaluable as I navigated the complicated process of establishing healthier relationships. Serenity Resorts continued to flourish, expanding internationally while maintaining the intimate, personalized, luxury experience that had become our signature. I found deep fulfillment in building something meaningful entirely on my own terms, not as rebellion against my family's narrative, but as authentic expression of my values and vision. As I reflect on this journey from hidden success to public truth, I'm reminded that we all wear masks at times, sometimes to protect others, sometimes to protect ourselves. The true measure of growth lies not in success or status, but in finding the courage to remove those masks, stand authentically in our truth, and allow others to do the same. The path to healing isn't always linear, and reconciliation doesn't always mean returning to how things were. Sometimes, it means creating something entirely new from the painful but honest acknowledgement of what was broken. In that space of authentic recognition, true serenity becomes possible. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family expectations? How did you handle revealing your true self to people who thought they knew you? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it insightful, and subscribe to my channel for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your authentic path. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply to stand in your truth.